Welcome to another progress update of my Void Knight Autobomber early end game kind of explorations, realizations, and other kind of things. This can be treated as a second part of who this build is for video, except I'll try and be a little bit more structured, talking to you specifically about pros and cons of this build as they appear to be to me on the verge of level 70. Pros are that it's a multitasker's dream. This build is a multitasker's dream. What I mean by that is that it's so passive that it allows you to literally just barely look where you're going, as long as your resistances are high enough, and as long as you're not lagging far behind on the item level of loot too much, like as long as you're keeping up with the loot. You can literally just walk around and do other things. And by that I mean arguably even check your messages, answer emails, watch Netflix. That is probably the most realistic and most appealing scenario here, because our time is limited, but we still want to play the game, level up semi-passively, even if you treat this build, and that's smoothly us transitioning to the second beneficial point, the pro, is that you can treat this build as a build in transition. It could be your passive farmer while you are in a specific phase of life when you need to multitask and you just want to passively, very passively and uninvolved progress through the early end game, getting a metric tons of shards, lots of loot, perhaps for your alternative characters, and that kind of stuff. So it's amazing. I'm still waiting for anyone to tell me in the comments constructively what other build would give you anything similar to this. What kind of other build would give you as much freedom and as much passive? Let's destroy everything, level up in the process, and get stuff. So I'm not gonna rave about this too long, but this is the massive selling point. As a matter of fact, I probably don't even need any other pros, me personally. The passive multitasker's dream, very, very extremely accessible. If you have any kind of disability or any kind of other kind of stuff that doesn't allow you to properly enjoy any other games, in spite of how accessible they make the controls, you still need to push a lot of buttons. Here you don't. Now finally, let's talk about the cons, what I don't think, who I don't think this is for, and what are the obvious cons. First, very obvious con, solvable. It's not a foundational problem of this build. It is how slow it is. It is slow both in terms of dishing out the damage. It dishes out respectable damage, considering how little I do in order to dish it out. Like, there are always ways to maximize it. If I was actually pressing Erasing Strike, I'm sure you would agree, without any other change, I would have started suddenly doubling this damage that I'm dishing out, and that would have made it a bit less slow, a bit faster. However, general, how I traverse through space, it is slow. Sentinel has some movement, obviously, spells, skills, yeah, launch and other kind of stuff, but in all honesty, I somehow did not find anything that would work particularly well for myself, and I preferred to kind of keep it as it is, and I preferred to play it this way, but it comes with being a bit slow. Additionally to this whole slow element of the discussion, I would say that some of this slowness comes purely right now, artificially, purely because I'm demonstrating the build to you. So I'm deliberately not hitting Erasing Strike, because it does fine without it. But if you really want to, like I said, you can speed up suddenly dramatically by also contributing to, I don't know, killing this Torv the Crafter or whoever else, the boss, by adding a little bit of damage to it. Yeah, enough said, enough said. Because of how passive this gameplay is, because you are literally just walking around and hoping for your orbs to hit everyone and your, you know, homing missiles to hit everyone, because of that, I would say and acknowledge that some people might say that it's a boring build. Some people would say it's simply boring, like I'm not doing all that much. But hey, look, even like I don't want to risk comparing it to those kind of games, but you know those mobile games that are idle clicker games. There are massive amounts of people who play them and almost use them therapeutically for their mental health, to chill out after at the end of their long working day. So there is a market for those kind of games and for those kind of playstyles. All I'm saying to you is that this build is not exactly an idle clicker, but it kinda is. It takes care of itself. So all I'm saying to you is, of course, it would be unfair to compare it in terms of fun and activity with something that's a lot more involved, a lot more. It requires you to be like on top of things. it would just be an unfair comparison, which is why we're not going to make it. But also, having said that, very much happy to acknowledge that it is probably, for some people, could be quite boring. Final point that is a con that I'm going to mention here is that because the build relies, 99% of this build relies on Devouring Orb, Void Damage and Anomaly specifically, but Anomaly is kind of secondary to Devouring Orb. I would say, and this is where I would welcome experts who are not too high on a horse to reply constructively, I would say that speculatively, and from what I'm seeing right now through leveling process, I think that the scaling of this void damage, scaling of it, appears to be a little limited to me. Of course, I could probably invest into critical strikes that would basically scale the damage just because my gear is towards critical strikes of my spells, and in this case it's spell damage. And of course, right now I'm not just about void damage, but about spell damage that I'm already mentioning to you. However, still, compared to even elemental damage, even what I'm looking right now researching for necrotic damage, even what I'm researching right now for other builds that I'm potentially interested in, that I'm going to be working on, I'd say that scaling of this void damage and even spell damage, flat spell damage, not talking specifically about crits, is kinda appearing to be limited to me. But again, I never pretended to be an expert with hundreds and hundreds of hours in this game, which is why I'm always welcoming feedback and input from people who can tell me how to improve this build going forward. And this is it. This is all I wanted to tell you about, my friends. Again, who should play this, who should not play this, and a structured approach to the pros and cons of Void Knight Autobomber build. You let me know if some of this resonated. Have you started trying this build? And by the way, if you are still looking for the link to the build, check out the description of the video I have given in, and I created a kind of basic one, indicative one, for level 100, but certainly there probably will be deviation, and as I keep progressing slowly with this build, I'm gonna update the Last Epoch tools, and you can keep up with the journey if you would like. So yes, welcoming your feedback. Would love for some of you to also try the build out before you poo-poo it, and tell me what works for you, what doesn't work for you, or maybe what kind of changes you made constructively to this build to make it better. Can't wait to hear from you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I am back in World of Warcraft, and I will be, if you haven't figured out, publishing both kind of content, World of Warcraft and my second game, which often is Path of Exile, but in this case it's Last Epoch, so you're definitely in the right place still. Thanks for watching, goodbye for now.